You're listening to Power Athlete Radio, a podcast dedicated to empowering your performance every damn day. Join former NFL pro and Power Athlete founder John Welborn as he dissects the greatest minds in strength, conditioning, and more. So whether your goal is to be the hammer, destroy mediocrity, or simply move the dirt, you've come to the right place. Now with the warm-up done, let the gains begin.
Hey, Power Athlete Nation, I want you to buckle up for an intelligent and informative podcast with Dr. Desai. He is the CEO of Restore PDX, and he is a regenerative medicine doctor and radiologist that's pioneering innovative techniques that challenge the boundaries of traditional medicine. The one that was most exciting for me was the fixing of ACL ruptures without surgery. As you know, if you listen to this podcast for any length of time, I had an ACL rupture in '96, ruptured it sometime during my NFL career, and I've just lived without it. And as a result, I've had some, arthritic changes to my knee that I need to deal with. So selfishly, we get into the podcast, we talk about that. But for those of you that are, have kids, sports injuries, ACLs are something that is always present. And up until this point, the only option has been surgical intervention. So we get into some of the things that they're doing to fix ACLs without surgery and fix arthritis, fill in some of the tendons and the ligaments and torn cartilage. So they're doing some really cutting edge therapies with stem cells and PRP and really just using your own biologics to help you grow. So we get into that. The Bio Modulation, which is the red light therapy, I've always been on the fence about, but he's a big believer. So we're going to talk about that and some of the effects of it. So hopefully some cool stuff for you to take away. And more importantly, just shed some light on some really just amazing techniques that are happening in the world and just some changes and some advances. So Dr. Desai. I did a speaking engagement. I was invited to present at a conference on national security a couple of years ago out at the War College. And the guy that was in my group is a PhD from Brandeis, who's Indian. I'm actually from India, and then moved here and runs kind of this global health initiative for the U.S. Based out of Brandeis. By far the nicest man I've ever met, to the point where I was like, if you're adopting anybody, I would gladly take you. My dad since passed away. I'd take you as a new father. The sweetest man I've ever met. And then when we got to, I've always been fascinated by India. I'm sure you've been, but I always like how they'll find stuff in India that completely breaks the paradigm of what we know about evolution and where man was. I mean, all of a sudden they'll uncover something and they're like, this thing's 40,000 years old and we don't understand the technology that it took to build it. So he was kind of giving me a brief of all of these amazing things in India that they just kind of throw out of history because they don't fit within the prescribed script of what we know about humanity.
Yeah, it's easier to tuck it away.
yeah. He was telling me about caves. He's like, there's, I can't remember. I mean, I'm going to butcher it.
Magenta caves.
Yeah. He's like the precision, they put lasers on them and he goes, they have the precision of a laser and they're carved to a point that we could not replicate today on a scale that we could not replicate.
Yeah. That's insane.
Yeah. I love that stuff. Just because I feel like so much of our history, recorded history has been lost, that I love when these things pop up because everybody kind of scratches their head. I'm not a huge conspiracy theorist in any way, other than the fact that, if you find something like that, there should be an explanation, or there's, pieces of gaps in history that we don't necessarily know, much like health. There's a whole bunch of...
I know, it's a perfect transition to kind of what we're doing, using the human body to heal. And I think a lot of the tenets and things probably were lost to time, and using stem cells, using light to heal and to regenerate. And we have lost that paradigm. It's been such a challenge with regenerative medicine in the standard medical community. It's like, no, you got to cut that out. You got to replace that joint. You got to do surgery. You have to it's not going to heal. It can't heal. And it's really interesting to have to change that paradigm.
Well, where do we go wrong? It's funny. I've been, my wife has had breast cancer last year and they did a mastectomy, and then they went and did a PET scan a year later and found a nodule and they had to remove it. And so I've gotten, not only through her journey, but we also have a cancer charity, Wade's Army, and we've dealt with neuroblastoma for, I think over 12 or 13 years. And, my dad passed away from cancer, and pretty much every male in the United States, if not the planet, are either going to go from a stroke and a heart attack or cancer. I mean, it's really what's killing us. And so the standard paradigm for treating cancer, which is just pharmacology, just, let's kill the good cells with the bad cells, let's cut everything out. And like if you go back and you look in 1940, the guy wins, the Warburg effect, wins a Nobel Prize for that, for a different version of cancer. And now whether or not that was perfect or not, but I felt like they were like, mitochondria deficiency, diet, exercise, healthier, all these other things. Let's just push by the wayside, and then better living through pharmacology. Mm-hmm. And now we have.
No, I think it's part of it, and it's not all of it. I think it's so multifactorial, but part of it, unfortunately, where I see a big piece of it is monetization and scalability. It's such a systemic approach to medicine, society in general. And, I'm not a socialist, but there is, something that I see in medicine is, even with regenerative medicine, we can use the body's own tissues and cells and to heal and to fix things. It's really hard to monetize, right? You can't scale your own cells to treat you to like for somebody else. So everybody's like, okay, how do we put that in a bottle? And there's translating that, there's a loss, that fidelity is not there. And there's all these other things that come up with different types of cells, or cells that are maybe not yours, or material that's not yours, and something that's mass produced. You're going to come up with new and, unknown issues where you have an intelligent system already, and it's, very powerful, easy to use, and very safe and tremendously effective, but it's not scalable. It doesn't fit into like the insurance paradigm. And, insurance obviously is on everybody's minds and then the news and media in the last few days, horrifically.
How wild is that guy, lone gunman goes up and execution style kills that CEO, and then all of the stuff comes out about the, like the Senate oversight and the government stuff where they created AI to decline 90% of all.
We live that. I mean, part of our practice, and we're moving to, because most of the stuff that we do is, cash pay. Like the regenerative material, we've been in a hybrid practice, so we see patients because we want to make it accessible. Like it's a part of our mission to get this medicine out there and to get it accessible to patients, that allowing them to use insurance to come see us, to diagnose them, to order imaging, to get the right diagnosis, and then ability to treat. All of that's insurance covered. And then as soon as you flip into the regenerative medicine, it's not. And that's been a huge frustration. But all of those initial, like even just getting a patient imaging, it's such a challenge. Everything is correct in our chart, and they will deny whatever the procedure or the imaging, just so that you have to work. So we have I had 2 full-time employees literally on the phone all day, just calling to try to get in. And then you're waiting on hold for an hour. It's barriers. And then once you get online and then you talk to somebody, the chart, they'll look at and be like, oh yeah, that looks good. Okay, thanks for calling. Yeah. We'll approve it. And it's literally, there are so many folks that won't go through that trouble. Like there's practices that don't have full-time, employees just to sit there and call, and they'll say, okay, we can't do it. Sorry, it was denied. Yeah. And that's a cost savings to the business. And that's just from like, say, imaging. I'm a radiologist, and I really heavily rely on imaging to get the right diagnosis, but drugs, procedures, all these things. And some of these are, life-saving and necessary, and they're being denied, and the quality of life is dramatically reduced. So we can see that real life impact, and how people can get so frustrated with the standard of care, and when they really need it or their loved ones need something, it's, horrifically frustrating.
Yeah. We interrupt this episode with a shameless self-promotion. Are you a field or court sport athlete looking to dominate the leaderboard? Let me introduce you to Field Strong. Take your inner athlete to the next level by exposing yourself to the advanced training techniques that contributed to my 10 years in the NFL. Unlock pinnacle performance and level up your athletic potential today. Head to powerathletehq.com/fieldstrong and claim your 7-day free trial. Now back to the show. Yeah, we just went through this because after my wife had a mastectomy, breast cancer deal, her physician ordered a PET scan. Insurance would not cover a PET scan. They applied, submitted it numerous times. I just ended up paying for it out of pocket. And then that's when they found the nodule. And now they're like, oh, we would have never have caught this. Good thing you got this PET scan. So I kind of laugh and I laugh in a more of a tragic way, but you have to be so proactive with your health that if you're leaving it up to these individuals. And I think the thing which has always drawn me to some of the regenerative medicine, I'd love to get your story on how you kind of got in there. It probably sounds like you were more of a westernized traditional and saw the barriers and then realized that, there's a better way to do this. And I was in a similar boat in that when I retired from the NFL, I had a lot of damage to my knee and I went to go see an NFL doctor for some insurance. I mean, they have this kind of disability deal. So when you retire, they kind of do a whole bunch of, exit physicals. And because I was, played longer than X amount of years in the union, I had to go through all these kind of medicals. And the doctor that I went and saw was like, your knee's pretty damaged. You only have two options. I can try to do another surgery or I can do a knee replacement. And I remember being like, I'm like 32 years old. My knee has some pain, but it's more of a loss of function. And he's like, yeah, that's all we got for you. It's either a pill or a surgery. And, and maybe I can do a surgery, maybe I can fix it, but I'll do a knee replacement. And I remember thinking like, this can't be the only options. And then, stem cells come up and exosomes. And now all of a sudden you're at a point where I'm watching a video probably 2 years ago in Israel that they're doing biological joint replacements, opening them up, using lasers to remodel the joint and then filling them full of, every regenerative substance they can, interleukins, stem cells, exosomes, and healing it. And so that feeling of that's on the next cusp. And so, obviously joint replacements are a massive business. I just got off the phone with my mom. She is 85, fell and hurt her knee. Her knee was kind of swollen, went to the doctor. They did x-rays. And the doctor, she called me. She's like, the doctor was amazed. I have no degeneration in my knees or my hips. He said it was the first person that he'd seen at her age that had no bone degeneration or was in no need of a joint replacement. And I was like, Mom, get out of that place. You're going to end up with a joint replacement anyway. But it's how they make money. And there's. I remember at that conference, and I taught the doc from Brandeis made a great point where he said the United States makes up 4% of the world's population, but we consume just under 75% of the world's drugs. And our dependence on foreign-made drugs was kind of his piece and the largest threat to national security, that if those boats stop and those drugs stop coming. He called it the Thanos effect, which I thought was funny. He said it'll be worse than, one out of every other one because of our dependence upon this. He goes, when 4% of the population consumes 75% of the world's drugs, he's like, is that a health issue or is that a systemic issue by doctors to not fix these problems? So, yeah.
This episode of Power Athlete Radio is powered by Train Heroic, the most immersive strength training app experience on the market. We've built an online training business by partnering with Train Heroic to deliver all of our world-class training programs like Jack Street, Hammer, Field Strong, and Grindstone. To learn which Power Athlete training program best suits your goals, head to powerathletehq.com/training. And if you're a coach looking to build a business with the best training tech in the business, head to trainheroic.com/powerathletehq. And now back to the show.
A traditionally trained medical doctor. So, I went to, I'm a big football fan, by the way. So I went to The Ohio State University, got brainwashed into Buckeyedom, and then went to medical school for 4 years, did an internship in internal medicine, and then 4 years of radiology residency, where I had to read everything. And then I did a fellowship at Washington, St. Louis, specializing in musculoskeletal and imaging and interventions. So I can read everything, I put a needle anywhere in the spine, joints, and came out to Portland. My wife's a physician as well. She got her training here. So she's a dermatologist and trained it in Oregon. When I came out here, I started I helped start a interventional pain practice based on diagnosis, like getting the right answer. Patients would come in with pain, spine, joints. We'd be, using MRIs, imaging, ultrasound, get the right answer, and then, inject it with, at that time, we had steroids. This is like 2007, 2008. And like built a huge practice just on getting the right answer. But the tool that I had to treat patients was just making it feel better, like it was transient. And then they would come back 6-7 months later, and there's like, doc, that was amazing. You figured it out. And that first steroid injection is like the clouds part, the angel sings, the harps are playing, and it feels amazing. And then we do another one, and it doesn't feel so good. And after a few years, it was really frustrating. So even within a couple of years, I was frustrated with the standard of care. I was sending a lot of patients to surgery because we'd figure it out, and then the steroid would stop working. It was palliative, and then patients were getting surgeries, and they're coming back worse. A lot of them. And it was super, especially spine, and joints, and meniscectomies, and then the arthritis just accelerates in the joint. And one of our 25-year-old patients, or he was an employee, had fallen skiing 2 years earlier, partial rotator cuff tear, came in, and they wanted to do, they did a couple of steroid injections, and then nobody wanted to touch him with surgery because it was, the tendon's like a rope, and the rope wasn't torn like this where they could do surgery. It was kind of fraying, but super painful. And so I'd heard about PRP, or platelet-rich plasma, through some docs, around here, and they were mostly like naturopathic physicians, kind of alternative. And I'm very allopathic, MD radiologist, black and white. And he asked me, can you do an injection of something, or like PRP? So I looked into it. It looked safe. Looked at all the data. We injected it, with precise placement with ultrasound. And 6 weeks later, he came back like, doc, it's been 2 years and it's gone. The pain's gone. Can I go skiing? Can I work out? Is it fixed? And I thought he was just trying to make me feel nice because I'm a nice guy. And I'm like, okay. Well, I looked at it with ultrasound. I couldn't see the tear. Put him back on the MRI scanner. And at that time, the insurance was, again, we go back to insurance. They didn't want to pay for it because he was feeling better. But I needed to know what was going on. So I bought the tech. I was working at an imaging center, bought him a Subway sandwich at 7:00 at night so they would scan it again. And the tendon was completely healed. I mean, It literally looked native. And about 30, 40 procedures into doing that, because I was like, wow, this is incredible.
So
I sent it to my
one PRP injection and it healed everything?
The tendon was complete. It went from partially torn, and there was calcium deposits. And I'd love to, I don't know if it's appropriate for the podcast. I have lots of, I'm a radiologist, and pictures worth 1,000 words. I'll show you pictures of cartilage healing complete. We're treating complete ACL ruptures now, like complete tears. Instead of doing surgery, we're putting stem cells, and it's healing. Not only the patients are stable knees, but the ligaments intact, cartilage is filling in, things that I didn't think were possible. Like, we're documenting that, not just clinically. Patients feel better. Obviously, that's the most important thing. They're functioning, they're feeling better, but the imaging is corroborating that. Wow. But that's how I got into it. It was pure curiosity and luck. I was in the 2008, right place at the right time. And the thing that kind of changed my career path was the curiosity. Like, we did something, it worked. I didn't believe it. I was a skeptic. I was like, this is BS. This is a bunch of naturopathic doctors like spinning blood. I really didn't think it was going to work. And the patient was doing better, but it was that, hey, let's follow up. Like, you're diagnosed with an MRI that says it's broke. Let's scan it. It's fixed. And then, over and over, that kept happening. Wow. And that's where they changed my career trajectory. And that was that's kind of like the gateway drug, like PRP. And then when we started using cells like bone marrow, and I'm a huge advocate of fat, and even I'm not like these allogeneic, so like from placental tissue or exosomes. I mean, the future is really bright. Like, it's expanding, and we're going to be able to use it for all kinds of different like disease processes. It's incredible.
I'm fascinated with the ACL. I tore my ACL in '96, or actually, I think I tore it actually in high school. I was a senior in high school, and we were at my buddy's house, and he had like a big like fort lookout. And as I was coming down, the second to last rung on the rotted out ladder we were on broke, and I drove my leg straight into the ground, and I felt the pop. My knee swole up, and I came home, and I was going to go play in the Shrine game in high school probably in the next week. So I got in the pool with my brother, and he just did this over and over again. And all of a sudden, about 3 days later, the swelling went down, and my knee was fine. So I went to go play in the Shrine game, played all through college, and then at one point I was running on a reverse in the rain, and it slipped, and my knee swelled up again. They drained the fluid. There was no blood in the fluid. And then they recommended like, hey, I think you tore some cartilage. Just go in and clean it up. And I went to Berkeley just to kind of give you a little bit of backstory. And so this was over Thanksgiving, and we were going to go play in a bowl game. They said, hey, we're going to scope you. You'll be fine in a couple of weeks playing the bowl game. I thought, no big deal. Get the surgery. I wake up and my knee's in a CPM. And the doc had gone in and said, you didn't have an ACL. It was obviously an old tear, but yet they couldn't tell that my ACL was torn while I was awake. The insertions for my hamstrings were pretty thick, and I was a compensator is what they called it. The only thing that kind of screwed me was now I had an ACL reconstruction over Thanksgiving and hadn't told any of my professors or anything for finals. So I was having to crutch on a fresh ACL, having taken some painkillers, whatnot, crutch to class, and trying to take finals that I didn't study for. Needless to say, I did not do well that season, which I was pretty unhappy about because I had a 3.6 GPA, and all of a sudden now I kind of bombed it a little bit. I was a little upset too that they didn't wake me up and tell me, because I would have pushed it off a little bit so that I didn't bomb my finals. But that kind of started my deal. The other thing that the doctor did, which kind of screwed me, is my knees naturally hyperextend about 3 degrees. He fixed the ACL to 0. So, anatomically, one knee is always a little off. And then if I got a little bit of swelling, I would lose extension. And I wish he had fixed it back. I remember when he was, when I woke up, he's like, hey, I fixed your knee to 0. The research, and obviously the research was not conclusive, because I ended up tearing it again at some point. So I haven't had an ACL. I mean, last time I got my knee scoped, the doctor's like, hey, your knee looks great other than the fact that you don't have an ACL. So, and he goes, I don't know when you tore the graft, but he's like, we couldn't tell. So one of the issues that I've been going with is, since I don't have that ACL and continue to train, I get a lot of kind of micro movement on that tibial slide.
Micro instability. Yeah.
Yeah. And the popliteus muscle has decided to take over as the ACL. And so now I have this weird calcification in my popliteus muscle that's effectively caused almost like a doorstop, where now my knee is kind of won't go past 90. So, I have gone and seen all these doctors, and the biggest issue they run into is they don't want to go through the back of the knee to clean it up. Even though I did talk to a doctor that does knee replacements, and I guess there's what the knee replacement sometimes doesn't align right and is too tight. They can go in and do kind of a release within that popliteus. And then also in Asia, I found a doctor, I guess this is more common in Asia, that they do this in Korea, where they'll go and they'll actually release the popliteus. So I've done everything from PRP to exosomes to stem cells, Prolo injections, ozone. I mean, everything. I've had that thing injected, and it doesn't seem to be able to break that thing up. So part of this conversation is I'm excited to see if there's something else that I haven't done.
Potentially. I mean, there's obviously I haven't seen it, but off the cuff, there are debridement procedures that are available that can go in and, percutaneously. There's something called 10X and 10X bone, but they're really cool devices that can go in and break up bone or calcification. Mm-hmm. There's an ultrasonic frequency that it vibrates at, and there's a lavage and aspiration. So it's like washing and sucking out the dead and diseased tissue. Or there's a 10X bone that it can actually take away spurs, or what we call heterotopic ossification or calcifications. And then you can, plus or minus regenerative medicine to help fix the tendon. So I have a lot of experience myself with regenerative medicine. I have kind of a collagen deficiency. I don't know if you've heard of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, but we see it a lot with patients. And so if you look at my thumb, I can bend it back, this way. I can touch my thumb to my forearm. I can hyperextend my elbow. So good, I can put on muscle, but good at yoga, bad in football. Is what I say, because I would not last very long in a contact sport. I didn't. I loved playing sports, but I just couldn't stay healthy. And it was because that collagen. So I've had 18 PRPs. I had probably one of the worst Achilles tendons I've ever seen, and we filled the gap with the fat. With the fat is super cool. For the autologous fat, we take the fat, and it's the same day. So there's different ways you can process it, but you can keep the collagen and keep the substrate and the structure. So it acts as a bioscaffold, and you fill defects. So I had about a centimeter gap in my Achilles. We filled it with that bioscaffold. It literally set that day. It's kind of like a biologic putty. And then over the course of 6 months, a year, completely normal and even stronger than my other side.
Is it a collagen issue that manifests in the tendons?
Tendon and ligaments.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, and if it's bad, it's a spectrum. The disease is a spectrum. So I have it to, God willing, to a mild degree. if it gets really bad, it can affect like aortic valves, the aorta. People can dissect and like have, it affects any collagen tissue. So it's just that it's a laxity, and it's not an on and off. It's a spectrum.
Do you take like a collagen supplement, or is there a peptide or something?
Yeah. So collagen supplements help me tremendously. Red light, photobiomodulation has been a godsend. It's helped so much with pain and like increasing, your fibroblast and collagen content. It does it for like the skin. So the near infrared therapy for deeper tissues is incredible. And then when I damage something enough or it's painful enough, then injecting cells. I wanted to, can I show you something?
Yeah.
Just to show you what that potentially could look like. And I don't know if you, like your viewers or yourself would be interested. I wanted to show you what a before and after MRI looks like.
Yeah.
So, sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words, but I think it'd be pretty cool to, so I sent a request, but I can show you. All right. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Am I sharing the screen?
That's your Achilles?
Yep. So looking at it from the side, this is a sagittal view. Your toes are over here, the heel's over here. That Achilles should be nice and dark. And all of this is a huge tear, and it's tendinopathy. I mean, I couldn't even walk on it. It was so painful. And there's a thin strand here that's left. With ultrasound guidance, you can fill this gap. We fill that up with cells, and then this is what it looked like a year later. So pretty much brand new, like it's supposed to look like. So completely filled in. And that's that, going from that rope that has big holes in it to one that's fixed. And we can see that with tears, and then like what you talked about with your popliteus tendon, sometimes you have to debride it, take the gunk out, and then fill the gap up with that scaffolding, like that bioscaffold, and then and the body's an intelligent system with proper PT, with adjuncts like photobiomodulation or red and near infrared light therapy and other like shockwave therapy that tissue can heal, and it can heal even stronger than native. And that's what we're seeing, not only for this, this instance, but like you said, for the ACL, I think, this should be almost a standard of care for especially kids that don't have their growth plates are unfused. But we're doing 50 and 60-year-olds with, they're on the mountains and they're tearing their ACL. I have another case that's incredible. We had a professional horseback rider that they spooked their horse and it kicked her knee. And she looked down and her knee, complete ACL rupture. Her kneecap was floating off to the side. So it tore medial patellofemoral ligaments and a grade 3 MCL. They're going to have 3 surgeries. They're from Georgia. They flew out here, and we did the same mixture of the bone marrow, the fat, and the platelets. We like to mix them together.
Sure.
And then we injected under image guidance all those structures. And then they flew back, did photobiomodulation, and they had the means that they were just interested. So every few weeks they would get an MRI. And we have this really cool case, like compendium showing broken all the way to completely normal. And 7 months later, it was read as normal. She went to Emory, and it was read as normal knee.
My God. Wow. Is the fat being taken off of the donor? Like, so after I had my last knee surgery, so I got hurt in 2008 at the end of training camp when I was playing for the Patriots, and had to have surgery when I got done. And the doctor was just way too aggressive. Just did way too much, and I ended up with just a ton of swelling, and there was just a lot of junk, and I had to go in and have a second surgery to have everything cleaned up. From there, I flew down to Florida, and Dr. Parita ended up pulling out bone marrow out of my hip, spinning it down, and injecting it back into my knee. The funny part was he was trying to do a similar deal where he was trying to take out fat to use as scaffolding, and he couldn't find, which is funny because I was like, what? Like he couldn't find the fat that he was looking for. So it was like one of these things where he was beating me up with this like long stick that that looked like that was hooked up to a vacuum, and he just kept pulling out what he called like red fat. He needed like darker fat, and he's like, you're not fat enough. You haven't been fat long enough. But
here's a video. Can you see this? My tray here.
Yeah.
So watch this. This is a video, but this is after we've done the liposuction, extracted the fat, and then it's processed for about an hour in our lab. And we don't add anything to it. We're just removing all the stuff that we don't, the oils, like kind of the tumescence, the fluid that we put in, and you get a pure fat graft. But this is very different than like a stem cell concoction. And you can see here, this is the fat.
Do you feel that, because I mean, there's a lot of doctors that are
see
using.
How viscous it is? It's so thick. It's like a bioscaffold.
Oh, wow.
So it's that's all like the collagen and the extracellular matrix of the cells. So when you get PRP or you get bone marrow when you're injecting, it's very fluid-like. So if you inject it into an ACL or a structure, it's out. Like as soon as you move, all that stuff is gone. Or if you have a big gap like I had in my Achilles, you move and it's gone. The incredible thing after I obviously didn't do my Achilles case. One of the other doctors here did. But 2 or 3 days later, I had zero pain. And I'd been living with that pain for about a year. It kept getting worse. And when I drove into the clinic, because I was like, I have to see what's going on. Like this is either the thing tore completely and it's not painful anymore, or something's happening because there's no pain and I'm not on any medication. And when I went in and looked at the gap, the fat had already filled in, and it was already, I kind of pushed on it under the ultrasound, and it had already gelled in. Like it had already created the kind of that connection and that matrix. And so allowing those cells to crawl in. And that's the beauty of like having all these different tools. I'm not saying it's that's the silver bullet that fixes everything, but in the right indication, like fat's great. In another indication, it may be that, the amniotic fluid or somebody's really debilitated. Like you need somebody else's more powerful cells to help, but that's where the medicine's going. But we like that kind of like the triple thread of the bone marrow, the fat, and the platelets. Combining all of those factors seems to give us, phenomenal results.
The fat part makes dramatic sense. The ability to kind of create like almost like a sticky environment to allow it to kind of go in, because you're right. I mean, I've had PRP and a bunch of these different procedures done, and they've always been kind of underwhelming. The only procedure that I've had that was extremely overwhelming, where I thought it was amazing, was IVs of exosomes. So I got hit with about 3 trillion exosomes, and probably at like the 12 hours later, it was as if it cleared all the inflammation out of my brain. Like I was dramatically better. And I think that, maybe the hyperbaric chamber, kind of the mixture of a lot of different things that I've been doing, really kind of culminated in that moment. Because I remember about, we did it in the morning and went to dinner like about 5 or 6. And I was like, man, I feel great. Like I have this buzzing feeling. My brain worked great. Like I didn't feel any fog. It was like I had just woken up and had a coffee, and that didn't leave me for about 6 months. And so I've had some really great results with that. But I actually emailed you a copy of my most recent x-ray on my right knee.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take a look at it. And then if you have an MRI, that would be helpful, or any ultrasounds of that?
No, I got an X-ray. I don't like to get MRIs because I don't want that negativity in my life. I don't need them telling me what's wrong, whereas I feel pretty good. And what's wild is every doctor looks at my knee. It's like, oh my God, I have zero pain in my knee. So it's kind of a weird phenomenon. Yeah. I just want to have more range of motion, so I'm better at jiu-jitsu. So one of the issues I run into at jits is that if my knee's knocked at 90, when I play guard and do some things, I can't manipulate my legs. I got to use a ton of hip mobility, which I'm very lucky and very blessed with good hip mobility.
All right, it's locking up on me here. I was going to show you that the MRI of the knee like basically exploded and we were able to put back together. But
well, we could always, if you email it to Jacob, we could drop these in, right? Yeah. I mean, I've never been happy with the conventional, like, hey, we just got to keep cutting shit out. And even, the fact that now you're doing ACL reconstructions, biologics, I mean, it just makes so much more sense. And the recovery is so much different. I would much rather take 7 months to repair my own tissues than to wake up and have them take the middle third out of my patellar tendon, which they did do that. And then I had to deal with massive patellar tendonitis for almost a year. And that patellar tendonitis ended up culminating in the other knee because I was favoring so much, and then I ended up rupturing that tendon.
It doesn't make sense, like especially early on. I mean, there are absolute times, and I've worked with a lot of surgeons. I was founding member of one of the most successful surgery centers in Oregon. I've worked with that model, And absolutely, thank God we have amazing surgeons, because sometimes you absolutely need it.
Sure.
But there is this really large segment in the middle. Like you have palliative care. Somebody comes in, they have some inflammation, they get a cortisone injection, they feel better, they never need it again. Thank God, right? They get some PT, they fix their biomechanics, they're good to go. We have this huge patient population that we get injured enough where those palliative things don't help. But we don't need surgery, right? And we don't have, and everybody gets sent to an orthopedic surgeon, and they're a hammer. They're a really good hammer, right? But everything's a nail, and everything has to fit in their box. It's like we talked about with kind of the side that you started with India, like that kind of scientific, discussion, and you don't ever even look at these options. And some of these options, what are really cool is that some of these options, and why I get so passionate about it, is that we change the long-term trajectory of somebody's life. It's not just fixing that issue, right, at that time, but we can change. You fix somebody's spine when they're 30 years old, when they initially get injured, you save them a lifetime of misery. And I've had it done. Like I've had my 4 or 5 disc injected years ago, and it's fixed. And I injured it when I loved weightlifting. I injured it when I was 25 in med school. And over the years, it just kept getting worse. And my episodes kept getting worse and longer and more debilitating. If I had it when I was 25 or 30, I would still be probably running and other things that I had to stop doing. And so it's the trajectory change that you can heal, and it's true regenerative medicine. And that's why it's so compelling when you see that we can fix tissue. Like that's super cool. Like we can fix things, and not just for now, but this is, long term. And that's what gets me really excited, is the paradigm has to change.
Well, with the ACL ruptures without surgery, how long have you successfully been doing that? Because like when I was, preparing for this, I was doing a bunch of research, and there was, claims that the ACL that, which I thought was kind of a straw man deal, that the ACL that grows back isn't as dynamic and strong as it used to be, and that there's no blood supply in the ACL. I mean, I felt like I was reading a hit piece for orthopedic surgeons, and, because, ACL injuries are super common.
We've had about 50, and we're working on publishing the data because we have imaging. We have about 50 cases that we've done of complete ruptures. These are complete ruptures based on MRI imaging, orthopedic, surgical evaluation, and even there's a KT1000 device that demonstrates translation and rotation. I mean, it's a loose knee. We've injected those. We've had one re-rupture in a young athlete that happens even with a solid reconstruction, but there's some question about kind of the rehab, but we've definitely had one re-rupture. Of the others, everybody's still doing great, back to skiing, back to soccer, back to, normal life and activities. And what we're seeing is not only are we seeing the characteristics change, like you're getting a normal, I'll send Jacob some of the imaging and the progression, and I can even walk through that. But we're seeing torn ligament on MRI. That's how you diagnose it. And then you're seeing connection. It still lacks. So that the individual that got that's super cool, because you can see the sequential healing, that you get torn, then it's connecting, but it's still loose. And then over time, it gets taut. And then by the end, it looks absolutely native, like normal. That just doesn't happen magically. I think there's a combination of, hey, we're putting in this substrate, and then there's really good rehab, right? So you get that physical therapy just like you would if you had a reconstruction, which is critical. And so we leverage physical therapy, rehabilitation, augmentation with other, different modalities, shockwave, photobiomodulation, to get that tissue to heal. But it is really stressing that tissue. And the same thing works with cartilage, works with, spine, works with other joints. And so, and then the other part with the ACL, what's kind of cool is we're seeing that going from torn to here within 6 weeks. Wow. So you could theoretically,
just one treatment,
if you did a study,
just one treatment, and 6 weeks later.
Yep.
Wow.
So I can, when we're doing it, it's very precise. Like we're looking under live X-ray guidance, and we're filling it with a little bit of contrast, so you can see the cells connecting, and you want to bridge all those gaps. So it's very precise. It takes, a good 30, 40 minutes to do it well under live X-ray. Once you get that, to facilitate and start healing, within 6 weeks, you'll know. So, I was speaking with, some other docs, and said, we need to do a study, need to get some, folks on board, especially with pediatrics, like, girls soccer, or, I have 4 daughters. And
I got 2.
They have, yeah. We have 5. We have one little boy, but
and then I got girls. 1 boy. And then I got 1 boy.
1 boy, yeah. we're on the same track there. And so but imagine all these kids that have to get these reconstructions. I mean, there's a new surgery where they don't have to drill holes in the bones, but if their growth plates aren't closed, it's a very, invasive surgery. If you can leave with Band-Aids and inject, this bioscaffold, and we're going to develop even better scaffolds down the road that maybe we don't have to do liposuction. But if you're able to inject that within 6 weeks, know, hey, it's connecting and it's healing, leave them alone. If in 6 weeks it's not, it's still, loosey-goosey and torn, do the surgery. You haven't lost anything. Like there's usually downtime before a reconstruction anyway. Let the inflammation come down, do a little prehabilitation. And so I think that there's this methodology, I want to get it published, get it out there, and larger institutions or places that have this patient population, hopefully they'll carry that forward, because I do think that in this vein, and also we're doing stem cells and cervical discs and saving patients fusions. We're doing it lumbar. I mean, it's incredible what this is doing. If you get the right diagnosis, if you get good material, and that the precision biologics and then precision delivery, we're seeing a 90% success rate overall. I mean, it's really tremendous.
What's the window from the time the ACL is torn to I'm sure that when the ACL is torn, it's fresh. And so that's probably the best time. What's the longest that somebody could necessarily?
We've seen 6-8 weeks out.
Okay.
Yeah. And so if you get, if you get a chronic complete rupture, we probably haven't seen that patient. We have seen degeneration. There's another form of ACL tearing. It's called mucoid degeneration. So it just like we saw, you get tendinopathies. It's chronic. It starts to wear down and get loose. There's another form of ACL dysfunction, and it's called mucoid degeneration, where the tendon just it's almost like they call it a celery stalk appearance on imaging, where you get fluid in the fibers, like the rope. Like a healthy tendon is like the brand new rope you buy at Home Depot, really tight twine. And the tendinopathic tendon, imagine the one that's just unraveling. And so you can fill in, but it gets loose. So you can fill in those defects and then that can heal. So that's what we've seen more in chronic. But if somebody has a chronic complete rupture and there's no tissue, then it's unlikely to. If there's some substrate there, you might get connection. But when there's nothing, and that's when you're looking at, complete Achilles ruptures and tremendous retraction, that I was lucky, I had a little strand left. You can see on the back end of my Achilles, there was enough. And even then I thought, I'm going to try this. But in my mind, I was like, it may not work. And I'm kind of a catastrophizer anyway. And I was like, okay, I'm probably going to end up with a surgery.
I'm fascinated by the collagen and also the photobiomodulation. So unfortunately, there's so many things in the world, and a lot of times when I'll use the term biohackers attached to it, I tend to think it's bullshit and I turn away. So the Dave Asbury's and those fucking charlatans that exist on the internet that are constantly pushing these things. The minute that he jumps on anything, it could be good, but I honestly put up my defense because I know that guy's so full of shit. So even the red light, we have a big panel deal. And I've, been hearing about collagen for years, but I've never had anybody actually give me some surgical interventions or really MRIs to be like, hey, if you do X amount of time under tension, take this is what we're seeing within these changes. It's always I think I'm better. I think my skin is better. I think this. I mean, one of the issues I ran into in my shoulder was I ended up injuring my shoulder, and we did a bunch of voodoo floss, which was a bunch of compression to try to break up the scar tissue. And it ended up deteriorating my capsule in the back. So when I went in and finally got my shoulder scoped, the doc's like, your shoulder looks fine. It's going to present like a frozen shoulder because the capsule on the backside's just deteriorated. And he's like, we don't really have the technology to improve the tissue quality in the back, in that capsule. And so that's where collagen, and I keep seeing that, but the biohackers have attached to it, which makes me think that it's, kind of bullshit.
Yeah, it's not. There are, just like regenerative medicine, there are charlatans out doing that. They do it improperly. And that's going back to I have a 3-legged stool of regenerative medicine, precision diagnosis, precision biologics, and precision delivery. You can have LeBron James' stem cells and you put it in the wrong place or don't have the right diagnosis, you're not going to get any benefit. And so when you're looking at the term for red I'm passionate about it. I'm biased. I'm working with the company. I'm their medical director. So let's put that out there. Like, I'm very biased on red light, but I only get behind things that I truly believe in. And like the first time I felt that, like, I have this slide. It's like the American Buddhist. It's just like, holy moly, we found enlightenment, was with PRP and regenerative medicine when I was seeing those changes. And the second time was with photobiomodulation. And the medicine is real. I just spent a week in London at the World Academy of Light Therapy. And these are the highest level bench research scientists from Cambridge and Harvard and Hopkins, and they're working on zebrafish tails and translational medicine and bench work all the way to like clinical work. It was 153 lectures from all over the world. It was amazing. And the reason I went there was to prove it to myself, because I feel the same way. Like, I am absolutely, every time I look at technology, I'm a skeptic first.
Yeah, me too.
I'm like, how is this? And so I've been using red light for about 7 years for myself, like with this collagen like deficiency that I have. And I was going to really expensive places for red light beds that are $150,000.
Yeah, like the big Thor beds, like the big Thor beds.
Yeah. Yep, the huge beds, and they're awesome. I mean, they're really good. And what I noticed right off the bat was I felt better, but my sleep. So I use an Oura Ring. It's here somewhere. So I use a sleep tracker, and the first thing I noticed was my sleep. My REM like tripled. Deep sleep went up. This is after one night, one session. And my heart rate variability, which is a measure of health and wellness, profoundly increased. Like, it went from a 39 to 165. Like, it was incredible. And that's like elite, high level athlete or Buddhist monk, like really good, like HRV. And I noticed those changes immediately, and I felt better. So I started using that. It was really expensive to go to these places, and it was hard to get to because you need multiple. It's kind of like microdosing this medicine. You're getting a dose of photons, and it's helping healing. And so when somebody approached me with, hey, can you implement this? Because I was telling patients to go to these places, and it was expensive, it was hard to get to. And can you implement this in a at-home form? And so you're seeing all these red light, LED, near-infrared panels come on board, and people are saying it's working. I tried it out. I took one home. I loved it. All my kids, they're 4 of them are really high-level athletes. They're all using it. My wife's a dermatologist. She's a big-time hiker. She's using it. Everybody's loving it. And I said, okay, I got to go and figure out if this technology is real, because we do low-level light therapy. There's a lot of data that's I've been exposed to on lasers and low-level light. So not lasers that are ablating or cutting, but lasers that are stimulating healing. And the term is photobiomodulation. So when I went to this meeting, I was talking to these scientists. The thing that I asked I got up and close with a lot of the brightest minds in this medicine, and I asked them is, are these LED panels, are they providing the same sort of benefit that the lasers are, or is it working? And there's like, absolutely. Their light is light. It's dose dependent. Laser is coherent. It's focused. It's high energy, and you don't need as long underneath that, but it's only affecting that local tissue, where LED, light emitting diode therapy, it's diffuse, it's incoherent, but it's covering a lot broader area. And the depth of penetration may not be as deep, but it's 20% difference. It's not a huge difference, especially depending on how powerful the LED source is. So the medicine is legit. All the science, there's 12,000 published articles on photobiomodulation. If you go to pubmed.gov, I mean, it's overwhelming. But I came out of that meeting realizing, okay, this is legit and real. And it's kind of funny, like, as I've been diving into this, I've been reading the articles, the science is absolutely there. It's how we're using it, and it's the device. Because there are devices that you can get on Amazon and other places that are so underpowered. It's called irradiance. It's milliwatts per centimeter squared. You get no power, and you're not going to get any.
What would be the marker? Like, if somebody was looking at a light panel, like, how could they tell if that one? Because there's no standardization. So whenever I look at these and they give all the specs, I don't know.
Third-party testing is critical. So if they are third-party tested, okay, that's what we did. Like with our panel, you want somebody else, not the company, validating what you're saying.
What's the name of your panel? I'm just so that I have something to look up.
RedVive is the company. RedViveHealth.org is the website, and I can send you information. We third-party tested, and there's a lot of good devices out there. So I love ours. It's very specific wavelengths. So the criteria that you're going to look at are the specific wavelengths. Like we're targeting the musculoskeletal system and the wavelengths that are going to stimulate mitochondrial efficiency, stem cells, and neuropathic pain healing.
Gotcha.
So those are ones we focus on, and that's a combination of the red and the near infrared. So you want to look at the right wavelengths, and you want to make sure like a device is actually emitting those wavelengths. Number two is the power, is the irradiance, is how powerful they are. And that's where the wraps and those things are like the face, they're just not powerful enough yet. Just like technology is changing, right? We went from PRP to exosomes and things change. Currently, to get enough power delivered into the tissue, you need a panel, right? Especially for what we're trying to do. So if you want to help with your arthritis, with shoulder pain, with the stuff that I'm dealing with clients, we need a powerful device, and that's where the panel is. And we're actually working on a U.S. Made, produced device. We're working with an engineering group out of Washington, and super excited about that technology. But we're always we want to push it, because once I get into something, just like with stem cells, like I'm in. Like, this is super cool science, and the ability to it's photobiomodulation, using photon energy to modulate the biologic systems, and then that's actually what it's doing. And what was even more kind of assuring, this was literally 2 weeks ago. I was looking in our kitchen table, and my wife, I told you she's a dermatologist, on the kitchen table was a Journal of Academy of Dermatology. It's JAAD, J-A-A-D, probably the most prestigious and scientific journal in derm. On the front cover is a mitochondria with red and near infrared light shining in and hitting this photoreceptor, and stimulating change. And it was a CME article on red light therapy. And so it's legitimate. And even in the article, it said light emitting diode therapy is the preferred methodology because of the microdosing, which is critical.
Well,
this is
when you keep going back to microdosing, like what would be like the, daily, like, is it 15 minutes a day? I mean, I've come to the conclusion that pretty much microdosing everything, and I know people use it and relate to psilocybin, whatever, but whether it be exercise reading, like it's better to sit down and read for 15 or 20 minutes than to read 3 hours like once a month. So, whether it's aerobic work and training, like these kind of small little pieces. So with this, I mean, is it 15, 20 minutes a day kind of a thing?
Yeah. So there's a bimodal distribution of benefits. So you can do too little and you can do too much. The good news is that window of efficacy or benefit is pretty wide. So anywhere over, say, 5 to 7 minutes, like local targeted therapy, to anywhere like 30 minutes a day is probably a good range. If you start getting over that, you can get overstimulation and get fatigue. The other, and the overheating, you can go past photobiomodulation to heating. And so there's a couple of things with that. So you want enough therapy to make a difference, but not too much. And everybody's a little bit different, but the window's wide. So part of this is titration to how you're feeling. And then the second part to that is that you have a targeted therapy, like what it's doing to the local tissues that you're, irradiating. Irradiating sounds bad, but you're putting light on it, right? You're irradiating that tissue. There's a local targeted effect. So the mitochondria get stimulated, you get more ATP production, you get reduction. There's capsaicin receptors on nerves. They're called TRPV1 receptors. They get downregulated. So you have immediate analgesic benefit, but over time you get healing. So that's that dosing. The other thing that it does is you get a systemic response. So what got me hooked was a study that came out that they did and what's really fun about photobiomodulation is all the research is so easy for me to read as a regenerative medicine specialist, because I had that learning curve with regenerative medicine, and all the literature now in photobiomodulation is synonymous with that because it's working on very similar mechanisms. So it's really easy to read. So one of the most compelling studies that I came across was they did blood samples. So they took peripheral blood and they measured CD34 positive cells. So those are your mesenchymal stem cells in your peripheral blood. Yeah. And so that's when you know how much stem cell load you have in your peripheral blood. Then they irradiated with red and near infrared light just the tibia, because it's close. They wanted to get to marrow. They irradiated that for 15 minutes. 2 hours later, they drew blood again, and then every day for 4 days they drew blood and they measured the CD34 cells and one of the white blood cells called macrophages that are initiated in healing. In 2 hours after that irradiation, on average, there was a 300% increase in stem cell counts on those patients, and it lasted anywhere from 1 day to 4 days. There was 1,000% increase in macrophages. And the other thing, that there's a phenotypic change. It changed the macrophages from an M1 to M2, so more healing anti-inflammatory macrophage. So it's stimulating that sort of response, but that's systemic. That's everywhere. So that's going to all the places that you're breaking down and don't even know about it. those cells, just like, and that's where it comes back to the exosomes, the systemic response, right? They're crossing those cells. Now, who doesn't want 300% more stem cells in your body circulating, right? They're going to cross the blood-brain barrier. They're going to help with neurocognitive decline.
Yeah.
They're going to help with all kinds of changes. And you're getting a microdose. So it's like microdosing stem cells every day. Like it's super cool. And you may not have to, some patients, they need it every fourth day, right? They had that bump and it stayed. Some patients, they had it and then it went away. But what we're seeing, the stem cells live in the fat, they live around the blood vessels, they live in the bone marrow. When you stimulate them, right, they crawl into the blood vessels, and the blood vessels are the subway system of your body. And then they go to areas of injury. And then they leave the blood vessels and they crawl out and they help with healing. When we do stem cell therapies like what we do, we're going and extracting, we're excavating those cells from fat, bone marrow, and then we're putting it directly into areas of injury and in high concentration. But you do this in a much more like subtle, gentle fashion if you do IV stem cells or you do, photobiomodulation, which is another reason why I'm so excited that if we get these devices in homes, like who doesn't need that, right? This crosses all barriers.
Selfishly, I'm more curious too on the collagen deal, whether it's like a peptide for collagen or like if you're like taking like a collagen orally. Because I have a panel and I'm thinking now I'm going to go blast my shoulder, the back of the shoulder. If I can take collagen supplements and maybe find a peptide for it, inject it right in there, and maybe see if I can help heal this my rear capsule.
I'll send you a study that came out like a couple of days ago on which was really compelling. 630 and 850 nanometer wavelength light, super elegant study in the dermatology journal, and they put it on the abdomen. And they noticed, so they were looking for fat loss. So they shined the light on the abdomen twice a week, like 3 or 4 minute sessions, pretty similar or less, powerful than our panels. And then they did 10 sessions over the course of 5 weeks. They did ultrasound, so they measured like the fat thickness, and they also did biopsies. And they looked at the fibroblast and collagen, and other indicators. And I can send you that. They have like the photomicrographs, the pictures of it, and you can see the proliferation. And they did a sham group too. So they did a sham group that got no light. They did a light group, and then they did another group that had a light therapy, and they're looking at some other cream. And actually the light alone group did the best of all of them. It produced the most, and you can see the collagen proliferation because they're staining for collagen on the slides. It's super obvious. I mean, you see the fibroblasts, all those new cells that are helping in healing, and you see the fibroblast, and it showed a significant reduction in fat thickness as well. So it's literally now scientifically proven to burn fat, and that's a very minimal dose. Like that's not very long and not very much. So it's super compelling.
Wow,
on multiple fronts.
You have piqued my interest. Like I said earlier, when charlatans attach to things, I'm always very like, that guy's full of shit. Because it's that effect where if somebody bullshits you about one thing, I kind of assume everything's bullshit. But yep. I'm glad that you're actually pulling it back. I think that there's some amazing stuff. The one that's cool is that, if you're using all the biologics, like, the scaffolding, the stem cells in that, I feel like the photomodulation is kind of the driver. That's almost like the, when you're hitting it to that, like that's got to be almost kind of one of the catalysts that helps it continue to work.
We call it, there's a term in photobiomodulation, it's called preconditioning. Mm-hmm. And they're also using it for like athletes and weightlifting. And they're showing that there's a tremendous increase in, and I'm not a sports medicine science guy, so just, I don't want to speak completely out of turn, but VO2 max is improving. Their peak load is increasing, and I was trying to understand that a little bit more. But some of the parameters of length of time that somebody can perform activities, all of that's dramatically increasing in athletes with preconditioning. So 15 to 20 minutes before exercise activity, they get dosed, and they're seeing dramatic improvements. And when you go back to, it doesn't have to be as targeted as you think. So it's not like, I have to hit, every single area. If you can get a large enough area of stimulation, you're going to get a systemic response. And so that's what's leading to these changes. I notice, like, I love exercise. I love weightlifting. And my DOMS basically goes away if I do preconditioning. Like especially like a heavy leg day. I don't get the soreness. I mean, I kind of like the soreness a little bit because I know I did something.
It's a receipt.
But it's really
yeah. I call it receipts. Like you want to go to the gym, you want to get a receipt.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. Not to use that, but yeah. So you don't get you don't get the big Costco receipt, right?
Yeah.
You just get a kind of a small one. But it's really interesting to see all of the these different dynamic changes. For your shoulder, it's very easy. Like definitely having the the collagen, orally taking that, doing the photobiomodulation, but then also stimulating with exercise, really kind of working, that capsular tissue. The other thing with a regenerative medicine specialist that really knows, like there are certain societies that have taught, I've been part of those nonprofit societies and teaching, like you can go and hit they're called glenohumeral ligaments. You can hit those posterior glenohumeral ligaments and really tighten them, that capsule with PRP or regenerative material, and it makes a huge difference. It's very precise. It's ultrasound guided, but treating that kind of fascial tissue and the capsular tissue, and it's really gentle. But that can provide a tremendous benefit. But you have to get precise, right? It can't be somebody palpating and injecting. It's gone beyond. That was 20 years ago.
Sure.
Right now with ultrasound guidance, I mean, you can see those capsular structures. You can hit where they're attaching to the bone, and you can get a lot more benefit than kind of the blind, kind of the old school methodology.
My body is pretty interesting in that I think my body is smarter than I am, and it knows that I'm pretty stupid. So what it does is when I hurt a joint, instead of creating laxicity, the body does everything it can to tighten the joint down. So like if my shoulder, injury happened, most people get kind of a loose shoulder. My shoulder exactly went the other way and just got tighter. Same thing happened to my knee. All of a sudden, as my knee got injured, all of a sudden it started just stacking more and more osteophytes and other things trying to encase me. So I think my body realizes like, hey, this guy's not going to stop. So we have to do everything we can to like create protection.
To buttress that.
Yeah. It's the weirdest thing. Any doc's like, I've never seen anybody's body do this. But it's probably just, I don't know. It's smarter than I am. How come could it be that simple? I mean, most people that I talk to, and me included, that have gotten stem cell treatments done in ligaments and joints, it's always very underwhelming. Like the results never quite were what they wanted. So is it the fact that, they inject it into a joint and it's just gone because they haven't created the scaffolding with the fat, and that what you're doing is a little bit different, where you're looking at almost creating like almost putty is what it sounds like if you put it in the joint so that the healing stuff just doesn't drain out and just doesn't get right back into the bloodstream?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. The material that we're using. I'm a big, believer, because we've used all the different, types of material. Currently in the United States, there are like FDA regulations against using some, allogeneic products. So we've stayed away from those when those guidelines went in. But I used them before. I used a lot of amniotic products. We used exosomes for a short period of time, stem cells. But the allogeneic or the autologous products, those from within your own body, I've just seen the best results. Like I have the most, number of patients using that, but by far I feel like, there is intelligence in the system, and they're your cells. Like you're concentrating them. Unless you have some major systemic issue, if you're relatively healthy, you're going to respond well. The other thing is looking at the, this kinetic chain and the joint as an organ. When we look at a knee, like you have to look at it thoughtfully. Like a lot of folks, they'll say, okay, we're going to take stem cells. And I used to do that initially. We take cells, take a needle, inject the joint, drop the mic, walk out. I was like, okay, that's a stem cell therapy. But when you look at somebody's knee, if they've had injuries before, and like what we're doing now, like that one example with, those are very obvious, but they tore their MCL. They had their medial patellofemoral ligaments, the ligaments that hold the kneecap, they get dislocated laterally, or they got kicked and the kneecap ended up on the side of their knee. All those ligaments were torn. We have to heal those. Right? You have to heal the ACL. So but you have to be very precise. And so when you're looking at somebody that has, let's say, a knee instability or knee injury, we're oftentimes now treating all of those structures. Mm-hmm. Like I will inject the popliteus, I'll inject the lateral collateral ligaments, we'll inject the MCL, we'll inject stabilizers, not just the putting it in the joint. The other thing that we're doing is sometimes if somebody has like bone marrow swelling or bone marrow edema, we'll inject the bone. And the bone is a major, you have to think of the joint like an organ. And, the cartilage is kind of like the grass, and the bone is the soil. right? Or it's like the floorboards. Somebody was giving me an example, like you have the hardwood, then you have the floorboards. You got to reinforce both of them. So sometimes we're actually drilling tiny needles into the bone and injecting the cells into the bone, and we're seeing, much greater benefit and cartilage healing. Like there are cases that I can show where there's a complete, and I was blown away when I saw it. Like again, disbelief until you see it, where there's complete gap of cartilage. There's no cartilage, and the bone is swollen underneath. And we've injected all of those different areas, injected the bone, got the soil, kind of aerating that soil. And then a year later, there's new cartilage. We didn't do an Oates procedure. We didn't do a plug. We just literally injected those areas, and the body's smart. It healed the bone. So the bone is now healed, looks normal. And then it laid down new cartilage, and the gap is filled. Wow. We've seen that stay filled even 5 years out from a procedure. So it's really, I think there's an art to the medicine, and it gets, like I told you, that three-legged stool, I always go back to that. Are we treating the right thing or things? And sometimes it's more, you have to do more than just put medicine into the joint. Are you using the right medicine? And then, are you putting it into the right areas? So I think that diagnosis, biologics, and delivery, if you do that, we still fail. I'm not saying like we're 100%, but we see probably in the 90%, success rate of tissue healing. And then we're very accountable. Like I'm very curious. Like I want to see it afterwards, even if it fails. Like if it fails, why did it fail? Like what did we miss? Did it not affect the change that we, or did we fix those issues, but we're missing the boat? Like, is it something else? Like, is it a nerve issue, or did I miss? Is the pain coming from the spine? Is it coming from a joint above or below? Like what's happening? Or is it more of a functional issue or a fascial issue?
Most of the people, and I will say this, other than one person that I know that's gone in and had back surgery, has actually come out with a worse effect. I know one guy, my training partner, had a piece of bone break off and was stuck in a disc, and they went in and they removed it and cleaned it all up, and he's actually better than he was. But for most part, and I saw a ton of back injuries in the NFL. I mean, a lot of guys ended up having, different pieces and things done for that. For me, I was very fortunate. I never had any back pain, and I never had any hip pain. Like the only thing that ever got me was just, a helmet to the knee and, slipping. And it's just wild to see like the injuries that guys have. I was just at the Kansas City Chiefs game on Sunday. I flew out for like a Legends deal. I'm actually wearing my cool vest. Cool. Yeah, look at that. It's big time. And it's pretty interesting to like run into former teammates, and all of a sudden they just give you this laundry list of all their ailments, and they're like, how you feeling? I'm like, I feel great. I lift weights, I do jits, I still train. I wish I had a little bit more range of motion in my knee, but I don't have any pain. And they were kind of a little confused, The other day, I don't know if you saw on the news, but Mark Gastineau had a weird interaction with Brett Favre where he was mad at him for, giving Strahan that sack. And they were going through, Gastineau was on a podcast, like talking about all of his problems in 10 years and everything it stole. So it's pretty interesting I played 10 years, that a lot of the issues that these guys are having at least haven't manifested in me yet. And I think it's from one, staying active, continuing to train, having something at an outcome, and then being proactive with all these things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the healthier we talked about, the bone and the soil, the healthier the body, the better this stuff works. And that's why when I started doing this medicine, I mean, maybe a little bit for myself, but I really didn't know anything about the wellness world, like the real wellness world, like doing, things that are proactive to help the body heal. And we went deep, I went deep into it. We have a functional medicine department, but looking at all of the wellness parameters, obviously like foundational, sleep, nutrition, I think hormones are important, but having somebody that really knows what they're doing. And that's the concern a little bit with kind of the biohacking, community, is that, sometimes a little knowledge is dangerous.
Yes. I would agree.
There's brilliant people out there, but I always recommend like have the expert help you. Like there's really, really knowledgeable people out there that can help fill in the gaps. And that's why we're so passionate about, we have a regenerative wellness division of our company. So we do shockwave therapy, photobiomodulation, PEMF, like, we have electromagnetic stimulation, EMTT. We even have what is normally, it's interesting, we have a device that stimulates muscle hypertrophy and growth. It's called M-Sculpt. And in the US, it's only used for getting like a 6-pack abs or trying to, like fat burning.
Yeah,
we've seen that.
Isn't it like a freezing thing, like an M Sculpt? Isn't it like a cold deal where they
That's
kill
a different one. This one actually stimulates, like it's a electric stimulation of the muscle.
Okay.
And causes hypertrophy. They have a device, one of the paddles, it stimulates the muscle. It stimulates your abdominal muscles. So over like a 30-minute session, it's like doing 20,000 sit-ups. It's like super physiologic, the stimulation. What's interesting is,
you're like, I'm so painful, I can't sit up.
But in the US, it's targeting only cosmetics. In Europe, they have the same company has a full division on physiotherapy. So if you have an knee injury or you have an ACL reconstruction, they start prehabilitation with that same device on your VMO, right, on your quads. If somebody has back surgery, they're doing stimulation of the multifidi and all the back muscles and it totally makes sense.
Sure.
So we're able to leverage it, in that way to really it's functional health. And that's the key to all of this as we move forward. I think with stem cells is one part of it. It's not the only. It's a very powerful part of it. It's going to be able to keep you healthy. And then what you're doing, like I think it's that just like with photobiomodulation, it's the targeted approach where hey, I have this specific injury, but then this systemic therapy with like exosomes and delivering it everywhere and keeping your health, I think is vital. And that's where even the local, like they said, that when they shined the light on the tibia and it affected a systemic change, I believe that happens even when you get a PRP in the shoulder, or if you get some sort of regenerative material in your body, it's stimulating biosynthetic pathways in your body. Like you are creating that. And so like you get, the dosing. Now, if you put it in an IV, you're going to get it systemically, as well. But a lot of those also get trapped in the lungs. Like you get a first pass mechanism.
Sure.
That a lot of those, if you have lung pathology, that'll probably be really helpful, but a smaller amount is going to get systemic. But I can see this in the future when patients are having, interventional cardiology is going to use it, interventional radiology, I think is going to start using it in the future as far as delivering, if you have a stroke or you have an infarct, in your heart, like delivering cells to that area. We're seeing it work everywhere else. Why wouldn't it work there? And I think there's some the kind of preliminary research that's demonstrating that. But
one of the machines we've been using a ton, because I actually have one in the house, is the high pulse PMF, the high power PEMF. The effects of that are, I think, incredible. If I sit on that thing like an hour a day, not only I track all my sleep on the 8 sleep, but like my performance is better. I feel like I recover faster. Like that's been a pretty powerful tool. And what's interesting is I've seen them in chiropractors' offices for years, and they're always like, "Oh, go sit in that thing," and they never could really tell me about the effects and time under tension and load and the whole deal. So I got an opportunity to go out and meet the creator and the guy behind the high pulse PMF. And some of the anecdotal stuff was pretty interesting. And then also the idea that it's consistency, it's microdosing. If you use it for 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, it's a lot better than, an hour once every month. And so I had not heard it explained like that. But as I kind of get into this a little bit more, it's a little bit, and I'll actually ask you in a question, but like with, everything from, you got ice baths, you got, saunas, and now we got, red light therapy and pulse PMF. I mean, there's a million of different of these modalities to do. How do people kind of arrange this in such a way? Because you can't, unless you're some crazy biohacker who sits at home all day without a job, like for people that have a job that want to train and, kind of the non-negotiables for me are always going to be sleep, exercise, and eating well. And I feel like if you can get those 3 pillars, you can add a few others as time kind of allows. But, you figure 20 minutes in front of a red light, maybe a cold plunge or a sauna, lift some weights in this. And now all of a sudden you're looking like a pretty full day of just like recovery and performance modalities. So like, how do you balance that? And more importantly, like what's the best bang for your buck, I think is a good way of saying it.
Yeah. To me, again, I think the take out my inherent bias, but the photobiomodulation to me is of these other adjuncts. I think obviously, let's start from the foundation. Sleep is absolutely critical.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the foundation. You have to sleep well. And so if you're snoring and you're hypoxic and you need a CPAP, you need a CPAP. Like you have to get sleep and have to get oxygenated. The next level on that, I think, is nutrition. I think is critical. And that it's its own, topic. And then I think also mindfulness meditation is really critical. And so if you can calm the nervous system, I think it's really, really important. I just spent 4 days at a Tony Robbins event, and like state dependent.
How was it?
Amazing. I'm still like on it. It was a couple weeks ago, but it was fantastic. Just the energy levels. He just puts you in a different state. Right.
He's an interesting dude. I met him years ago when I was playing for the Eagles. We played in the NFC Championship game, and when that happens, they basically set it up so that you're going to the Super Bowl. So like, hey, if you win this game, we're going to the Super Bowl. We're going to get on a bus. We got to go. So you'd have to buy like tickets and kind of get all set up, and then you end up losing the NFC Championship game, and you have like hotel rooms and travel and everything set up for your family. And so John Runyon, who was one of my teammates, we just decided to go to the Super Bowl. This was in San Diego. So we were staying in La Jolla, and I walked into this watch shop. Just woke up in the morning, got a coffee, and there was this like high-end watch shop. And I always wanted to buy a high-end cool watch. So I figured, let's go in there. Tony Robbins was in there getting his watch fixed, and I had the opportunity to kind of meet him. Like 5 minutes into it, I had already bought a watch that he had recommended. And I was like, this guy, like this guy could have stolen my wallet and like got me into his cult in 10 minutes. I was amazed at not only how quickly he was to break down barriers, and just like it was just the one of the weirdest interactions I've had. And he's a big dude. I'm a big guy as well. And I went to shake his hand, and I was like, this dude has huge hands and like mannerisms, and just very, very interesting individual. To the point where I've told people there's only a few people I've ever met like that fit within that kind of Tony Robbins paradigm. I've seen a bunch of his stuff. I mean, it's there's a lot of pageantry to it, but he's an impressive guy.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of, some of the sales part of it got a little, much, but the inherent, the value that you gain from him and when he's speaking, and he's a special dude. Like, I think there's people on this earth that are kind of touched by the hand of God and are meant to do some things, and he's one of them. I mean, I think we all have a role in that, but man, he's special. I want after going to that, I was like, my kids should come and experience this, and at least have that traction, understanding of what is possible. That if in life it presents us challenges, that you can always go back to some of those core fundamentals. And I thought it was super powerful, but really positive, motivational. I think helped on so many different fronts, but I was really excited about that. So I think that's also like having that mindset is so powerful. Like it's so powerful, because you change when you do that. You're changing your hormonal, like your pituitary, what it's releasing, and the serotonin, all the dopamine, all those things. They have downstream effects.
Sure.
So positive mindset is so powerful in creating downstream physiologic effects. It's not placebo. Right? It's actual reality. And then getting to why I like photobiomodulation is it's at home, it's easy, and it's an everyday thing. Like we have it set up in our living room because everybody uses it. So come in after workout, sit down. If it's shining on my back, I sit on the floor and I practice guitar. If I'm facing it, I try to meditate. So you kind of, kill two birds with one stone. So that's something that's super easy. I have a sauna. I love sauna. You don't want to do that. One piece of it, you don't want to, I learned this at the World Conference. You do not want to do them at the same time. So there are a lot of saunas that have red lights within them.
Yeah.
You delete by superheating the tissues, like that photobiomodulation, all those effects that we talked about, they stop at 108 degrees. So when you get into a superheated, you're going to get heat shock proteins and a ton of benefits cardiovascularly from sauna, but you do that asynchronously. You do not want to do that together. Okay, so you will it'll negate the benefits. It's not going to hurt you, but it's useless.
Sure.
So you feel like so it has to be done at a separate time. But I think sauna is fantastic. And you can split it up. You can do, if you have your wellness regimen, say 20 minutes a day, you're going to dedicate to yourself, like your most important asset, your health. And you dedicate those different days. You can do red light 3 days. You do sauna, 3 days. And then if you have, I love cold plunge. Currently, I don't have access to it, but I did have access for a long time, and I was doing it on a pretty daily basis, or at least 4 or 5 times a week. And I got up to about 5 minutes in 40-degree water. Amazing. And I would start off my day with that.
so I grew up in Southern California, so we used to go surfing in cold water, and then obviously playing in the NFL and college. Like we'd always do contrast baths and stand out in the cold, and it's just part of life. So like cold water immersion to me is I'm pretty adept at it, and so when like this whole kind of ice bath, ice plunging kind of deal kind of took hold and I started seeing it everywhere, I couldn't understand why people were so like emotionally charged with it. You'd see them, they'd be like hyperventilating. I just get in the cold water. And so I have we have a pool. And so here in Texas in the winter, I just go get in the pool in the morning. And then we ended up having the CEO for Ice Barrel on the podcast. So he left a unit here. So I have it sitting at like 40 degrees, and I'll go out first thing in the morning when I get up at 6, like 6:05, I just go get in it for 5 minutes at like 40, and I get out and then just kind of like let my body heat up. Like we've talked about earlier, like I don't buy into a lot of the biohacking. So whenever people were talking about the benefits, but I will say that I feel dramatically better over the course of the day. I feel more resilient. I feel more switched on. Like everything just seems to be better when I go train, when I lift weights, when I do jits, just everything seems to be a little bit sharper. And then what I'll do is I'll do it for like 5 days, and then I like won't do it for a few days and continue to keep the same schedule and see if I can see a change. And then I'll go back to do it. And I kind of constantly am doing this. Like I'll do it for a bunch, and then I won't do it for a few days, and I'll do it once. And then I kind of see, because I'm constantly trying to prove to myself that I'm not full of shit. Because, whether it be, peptides or this, I mean, the things that I've really seen in my life, lifting heavy weights, eating a high protein diet, and sleeping, like outside of that, like everything else has been kind of anecdotal. The one thing that I've added in that has played huge dividends as I've aged, and I think I chalk this up to more just getting older, building a big aerobic base. So if I can do some form of aerobic work, and that's a microdose, 25, 30 minutes, it doesn't have to be 2 hours. If I can get on the bike and just kind of stay at that, like for me, it's somewhere around 137 to 147, beats per minute. If I can stay there for 20, 25 minutes, that's another one that's huge for me. So like lifting weights, and then some form of athletic mastery. So one of the tenets of Power Athlete, and really the foundation, is developing and fostering athleticism. And so what I did is I built a model for, I call it the blueprint of athleticism. And a lot of that involves, step, squat, and lunge, X, Y, and Z axis, and different movements, transverse, frontal, and sagittal plane. So then forcing people to continue to be athletic past the point, because one of the scariest things is, after people graduate high school, they probably never sprint again, and maybe they go do a couple sports. So continue to stay athletic and really just what I call athletic problem solving, the same equations that are presented to our kids. This is one that I joke with my kids all the time. We used to go outside and climb fences and climb trees and running and playing. And I forced my kids to like go outside and climb a tree. What if I fall? Well, then you're going to figure it out. How am I going to get up that tree? That's part of the athletic problem solving. So like setting these things up to have them be able to navigate, which I think for longevity is one of the most important elements of longevity. All these things are important, but continue to move and move well is so fundamental. But then making sure people are strong and they're stable and they can do all these. So it's really this like holistic thing. And, like really, and we do a ton of programming with people trying to get people stronger. But a lot of these, and I don't even call them biohacking. I just look at them as like recovery and performance modules. But I feel like people are so overwhelmed. Like there's so many things coming at you and you're like, well, how many vitamins did I take? Did I do this? I mean, there's apps to track everything, that I think you get to a point where it's like information overload, and you actually have to take a step back and see like what moves the needle for me.
Yeah. Yep. And that's where you talked about just, bang for the buck. What are the things they're going to do really well? And for me, this is anecdotal. I mean, all the science is there, but anecdotally, like sitting in front of that light 7 minutes a day in the morning, 7 minutes in the evening, it's actually like I've had chronic low back pain. When I do that, that's one of the tests I do. I don't have it. Like I literally, there's an end, like after getting up off the floor, my SI joints don't hurt. I've been blessed this year to I turned 50.
Nice.
And a couple of weeks ago, and my goal was to get to 15%. I had let myself go with the stresses of work. I have 5 kids. We have a very busy life. I let myself go a little bit. And this year, starting in about December, I wanted to get to 15% body fat by 50, and that was my goal. And I was started out at like 27%. It was not pretty, and dropped 30 plus pounds of fat, gained 3 pounds of muscle since last December, and implementing all of these. Again, a lot of the strategies that you're talking about, and this has been one of them. Is that kind of biohacking, but it can be overwhelming, and you can get too involved in it, right? So I think that if you can dedicate 20 minutes a day and then shift those things, I think that there is we talk like the hormetic effect, like stressing the body, just like we're doing with all of these different things like exercise, cognition. I think the mental health component. When you were mentioning, like, we have three, my wife does, rock climbers. Like, they absolutely love it. And I've noticed, that's also not just the physical challenge, but there's a lot of mental challenges of their roots. And man, they're some of the most fit and mobile. And you get injured at times, but what a cool sport that is too.
Yeah, no, I had coffee today with Shanji Habero, who's my jiu-jitsu coach, 20-time world champion, like one of the best to ever do it. And, he's dealing with like some neck issues. So we have a pretty good chiropractor that we go see. Was doing some adjustments and kind of helping him just get a little bit of mobility. You think, he just gets into some bad patterns, and just having somebody just work you through. So as we were talking about it today, that piece of like athletic problem solving, where now you're trying to use your body in relation to whether it be a rock or a person to kind of execute something, is so important. And I think it's one of those things that's kind of undersold. Whether it be, going out and shooting baskets, or just anything that you can do that allows you to use your body with like precision, accuracy, movement, and more importantly, like variables that are constantly changing, is so important. But I don't know how to, I guess you could kind of wrap that thing up, but how involved in like peptides? Like, I know that's a question I get hit with constantly, because it feels like every single day there's different peptides that come out. One of the ones that people ask a ton about, especially with jiu-jitsu, is like BPC and TB500 and a lot of those. Like, it doesn't feel that I guess you could say like the array of peptides is slowing down every time. Like, I keep seeing new ones pop up. Like, is this just a function of us exploring more, or is there just more on the horizon? Is there something that's going to eventually come out that, we can safeguard everything?
Yeah, I am just learning a little bit about peptides. I haven't used them, myself to any significant extent. I tried a very short stint with like BPC when my Achilles was injured, and was pretty underwhelmed with the benefits.
Yeah, me too. I just didn't know if you were using any of those, like any of the peptides had made their way into any of the clinical stuff that you guys were doing.
No, and I don't want, no, there's a lot of practitioners that swear by them. I think there are, if folks can do what we spoke about, like kind of the foundational things, a lot of times I don't think we need it. Now, if you're looking for maybe that you're super competitive and there's that little edge that it's needed, I can see that. But again, I have not had a deep dive into that world as of yet. And to me, I just want, if we can do the things that, are more natural, and maybe that's why I like the, our own cells, and, using there's so many things that you can do. You said there's all these different options. I think those, for the most part, translate really well. So I just haven't made a deep dive. And there's some hesitancy because it is a foreign substance. And I tried some of it and I didn't see an overwhelming result. The other concern is just kind of legitimacy. Like, when you're getting these products, like, where are you getting them from? Are they highly validated? I have some concerns with that, because it's kind of what's your source?
Yeah, well, the internet, and then you send some weird dude a Venmo account, and then the guy mails you some weird bottle. I've had people reach out to me and be like, "Hey, does this look legit?" I'm like, No, this doesn't look legit. Like if you're asking me, then you've probably already answered it. Unless it's unless it's coming from some form of pharmacy or some RX. Like if you're just buying something off the internet, you're kind of open to anything. I just didn't know if that was an aspect of it.
No, and we were actually, like, right now we're trying to recruit a physician that is doing more of that aspect of medical care. You have to be, there's just like with my deep dive into photobiomodulation. If we're going to do it well.
Sure.
Like there's breadth and then there's depth, and to me that's the challenge. Like there's so much reading that I have to do on photobiomodulation that's still out there, and I'm pretty good at understanding it at this point, but there's more.
Sure.
Like I wouldn't consider myself like a world expert. Like there's still details and understanding and depth. And I would want, if somebody's treating me with peptides, I want that. Yeah. Like just like you have, with jiu-jitsu, you're going to go out and get the expert to help you. I want that on that front, not somebody that's kind of dabbling in in peptides, because there could be significant deleterious effects. I've been speaking a little bit with Chris Duffin. I'm blessed to have him up in the Pacific Northwest, and got a chance to work out with him, and literally gained like 30 pounds on my incline dumbbell presses just with his technique. I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, why didn't somebody tell me this 30 years ago?
He's a wizard for all this stuff. I mean, that's how we got connected, just because he knows that, not only am I fascinated with the biologics. I mean, I was kind of actually going to ask you, like, when you're doing the exosomes, you're harvesting the exosomes from the individual, like, are you using, obviously exogenous? I mean, is that coming from a donor?
What we did, so I haven't used them in quite some time, but when we were using them, they were exogenous, so they were allogeneic from a donor, and it's kind of like the broth that the stem cells are growing in. They're releasing all of these exosomes. So we used I forget the name of the company. They're still around. Like they are now in. I feel like they're still a very legitimate company. It's just the regulations. If we're going to do that, it has to be under like an investigational new drug trial.
Sure.
To do it completely legitimately. But they're in phase 4. They're doing trials. So they're in phase 4 trials for different indications, from knee arthritis to systemic inflammation to long COVID. I'm a believer. It's just accessing. And so exosomes, there is, I think, one company out there, or maybe more. There are some companies that are taking either peripheral blood or cells from the individual, and then you would send it off to the lab, and they'll culture, expand, and access the exosomes. The closest thing that we're doing, and I really value this company. There's a company called Personalized Stem Cells. So we've been working with them, and what we're doing is when we're doing our fat extraction, we can take about 10 more cc's of the fat and then send it to a lab, and they're based out of San Diego, California, and they bank it. So they isolate the stem cells, they create your kind of like the sourdough starter. Like they get that, the sourdough starter, they freeze that, and then they can grow loaves of bread or the doses. And then so now you have a purified stem cell that's your own. So that's called personalized stem cell. Then whenever you need it, they can send it back. And the benefits of that, or one, is just concentration. So they're isolating the cell. The downside is you lose all that collagen matrix, that gooiness. You're getting a pure stem cell. But the difference is when we're injecting our cells per ml, per cc that we inject, there's about 150,000 mesenchymal stem cells per cc. When you deliver, say, the personalized stem cell, they send back the concentrated stem cells, and it takes about 2 months for them to do that. You're getting 10 to 15 million. So you're getting 100-fold stronger dose. Now mix that with the same day fat. Maybe you have the perfect mixture, but that's what you're getting. So you're getting a much, much higher dose. The other thing is that pure, when you get it, it almost looks like saline. And so it's a very purified stem cell. So you can inject it IV. You can use it for other applications safely. If patients have spinal cord injuries, like there was a study out of Mayo Clinic that they took those same, they're called adipose-derived culture expanded stem cells.
Sure.
So derived from fat, and they're culture expanded and grown. They injected that into the intrathecal space, into the CSF that surrounds the spinal cord, and they were showing dramatic improvement in spinal cord injury patients. So that's where it's the product, but you can deliver it safely in an IV, potentially, God forbid, somebody has a stroke or, cardiovascular, like heart attack, that they could inject it through through the arterial system into that tissue. So those are the applications that are growing with this. But right now it's totally legal, safe to send that, to get it expanded. And for certain applications, like for arthritis or for soft tissues, that's considered, there's certain pathways through the FDA that we can do that. So we started to work with that company. And they had a parent company called VetStem that has done about 50,000 applications for dogs and horses. So they have a really great knowledge base on how to leverage the cells and grow them properly, and FDA guidance as well. So that's a new frontier for us as well.
Hey, is a stem cells, like, would the stem cells from my body be dramatically better for mine? I mean, have they done kind of like double blind studies where they've, I don't know, seen the effects? I would imagine that your own personal stem cells are probably better or preferable. But is there, like, does the body really know?
Initially it may not, but there's growing evidence that, with repeated doses, the body recognizes that it's something foreign. So there's some concern about kind of an immune response to these cells, that the body's, it's smart, it's not yours.
Yeah.
The other concern is, even with exosomes, there's a small concern is, with you are getting someone else's mRNA, right? And that can affect your genome, right? There's messages in a bottle, and they're hopefully good messages, but you don't know what all the messages are saying.
Sure.
And so there's always a little bit of concern to get, allogeneic products, because there are genes, and you can have, kind of cross contamination that way. So there's some long-term effects, but overall, we feel that a purified stem cell, so say you're getting something from a placental, origin, that there is some immunoprivilege, that there are markers on those cells that the body knows that it's not your own, but you have some degree of, immunoprivilege. They don't want to attack it or cause a, host versus graft response. But if you keep getting that same cell type over time, your body may respond adversely to that. Because it will get, just like you're getting exposed to an antigen.
I was going to say, probably makes sense to go and maybe use our kids, maybe because their stem cells would probably be younger, maybe positive in that way. But how do these differ from the pluripotent stem cells?
Well, there are mesenchymal stem cells. So the pluripotent is the most primitive, right? So they can become any sort of cell. When we're looking at mesenchymal stem cells, so I could take a stem cell from your bone marrow or from fat and theoretically, inject it into the pancreas to try to grow endocrine tissue. It's not going to do anything. It would probably be not a good outcome. So those are different. So there are different cells as they start to differentiate, and they're within certain tissue. And so when we're using for the musculoskeletal system, so we're using mesenchymal stem cells. So those from fat and bone marrow, they're going to be synonymous with that. If you're using for like neuroendocrine or for pancreas or other cell types, then those have to be specific. Pluripotent is the more primitive version of that, and that can differentiate into anything or signal into become anything.
Gotcha.
One of the things that you have to think about, though, is when we're doing cell therapies, a very small percentage, we don't know, but it's small. I mean, it might be anywhere from 1 to 15% of the cells that we're putting into a tissue actually become, like we call it engraftment, actually become the tissue that we're trying to repair or replace. Most of it's signaling. So one of the late Arnold Kaplan, brilliant scientist, he actually coined the term mesenchymal stem cell. And, I forget, a decade or 2 decades later, he changed it. He called it a medicinal signaling cell, right? Because it's not, most of its effect is paracrine, is stimulating other cells to come into the area and heal. So it's really a messenger cell. You're depositing, it's creating this message to the tissue that, hey, we need repair, we need help. And then all those cells, they crawl into the subway system we talked about. They get into the blood vessels and they come into that area. So a lot of it's signaling. So even though it's, you might use a different cell type, it might stimulate a reparative response even in another area. And so that's kind of the fascinating we don't know all that's going on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes a ton of sense.
So in engraftment versus like paracrine effect.
Yeah. So is like, what's on the horizon? Like, I mean, we've talked everything from like arthritis to ACL reconstructions and, heart attacks and this. I mean, are we getting to the point where maybe in the next 10, let's say 10, 12, 15 years that a lot of these issues that would have necessarily been fixed with some form of surgical intervention can now get fixed with biologics and stem cells that are targeted in certain ways and other therapies?
Absolutely. I think that's we had that discussion of trajectory. Like we're going to change the trajectory of a lot of these degenerative processes. And in my wheelhouse, like there's so much out there that I don't know and don't fully understand on regenerative medicine and gene therapies and reprogramming, which is totally fascinating. But that's some of what's on the horizon that we're going to be able to specifically change very precisely and very specifically change the genetic programming. We hear about like CRISPR and all of these other like technologies that are coming out, and we're going to be able to reprogram cells to regenerate and do it in the right way. And so that's kind of like super future state, and exosomes is going to play a powerful role in that, because we'll be able to change what the message in the bottle is. Like exosomes are like messages in the bottle.
Sure.
Right now, we're not super well able to control the message or understand that message. We say it's a good message and it'll make things reduce inflammation and cause some benefit in the local tissues. But I think we're going to be able to augment that. So that's probably a future state that's super compelling and exciting. I think if we take a step back from that, what we're going to see within the next few years, and I think it's coming very quickly, is what we're doing now, but expanding that to the general society. And then we're going to see a massive change, because once you start to get a large N and you start to see those changes, that's when we're going to start to realize as a medical community, hey, we start this earlier, it's going to affect even more powerful change, right? That we got to start early. When somebody starts to develop the signs of knee pain and arthritis or other issues, we got to get them on this right track. We're going to change that trajectory. And I think that's what's most compelling to me, is the future state of medical care is really true preventative maintenance. So all these medical models that we have currently that talk about prevention, the stuff that we're talking about is really the prevention.
Yeah.
Like all the things we talked about, this kind of these wellness habits, movement, diet, exercise, mindfulness, energy-based medicines, like implementing those into a daily practice for society. I mean, like right now it's the biohackers. Like they're those that are really understanding that forefront, but we got to get this to the masses. That's where I think is most compelling to me.
As soon as I hear the term biohacker, like every hair on my body stands up, and I'm like, charlatans. But I'm promise you, I'm going to go in 7 minutes in the morning, 7 minutes at night. I have the panel. I just like nobody really ever, use it. And I like that, if like the microdose effect. So I'm going to definitely turn that up.
Well, I'm going to get, if you don't have our panel, I'm definitely going to make sure that.
Send it. I will gladly use it, and I will give you honest feedback. Anytime anybody sends me anything, I always go to use it, because I feel like it's disingenuous if somebody sends you something and you don't give it. But I'll tell you, I'm excited too, for the collagen supplements and some of the other things, just for the fact that, man, if I could just get a little bit more range of motion. But I definitely sent you, or I know I texted or emailed you over my x-ray on my knee, because at some point I have to go get all these osteophytes and get this thing cleaned up. But I've been actually looking for somebody like you that can come in and do some biologics after, or maybe even take a chance and be like, because one of the issues everybody that's looked at it is like, you got a lot of arthritic changes that we probably need to like clean out and fix before we go put some of the biologics in there.
Yeah. And that's something that we've worked with a lot of, surgeons kind of in a two-stage process. Hey, this is something that absolutely needs to get fixed first. We had, one case that comes to mind. There was a MBA guy and had a big bucket handle tear, but that needed to get, cleaned, and then come back and do, regenerative therapy to get it stronger. But it just depends. So yeah, definitely we'll take a look and give you my opinion.
Any recommendations on doctors too? I've been interviewed a couple of them, and, just trying to, at this point, like kind of take some time to make the right calculated decision instead of just running into it.
Yeah. And you're in Texas, correct?
Yeah, but I'm in Austin, but I can travel for stuff. I mean, Dr. Stedman, who since passed away, sadly, is who I would have gone and seen. And then, his kind of tree, which was Dr. Singleton, who has since stood on my surgery. He's since retired. So I remember when Steady scoped my knee, he said, "Hey, I'm going to have to redo this thing in 10 years just because you're going to stay active." And it's been 14. So unfortunately, he passed away, and the guy who assisted on his is retired. So I'm kind of at this point where I was like searching for other people in his practice, because the Stedman Hawkins technique is a little bit different. They use what's called a heat wand, where anything they cut, they cauterized everything. So there was a lot of minimal swelling and kind of after the fact. And then I think other people don't do it as well. So somebody that kind of fit into that vein is who I've been searching for. And Steady used to do something, he called it the package, which was for older skiers that were over the age of 40, where their knees were banged up. He used to do something called the package, where he'd go clean everything up and get them on some rehab. And that was the joke he made. He was like, you're going to be, I'm going to do the package for you in 10 years. And then he passed away. So, which the world is lesser for having Dr. Stedman in it. That guy was like an absolute just legend. And, I was very fortunate to have him work on me when, he scoped me on a Monday and I played on a Sunday type of deal. I flew in after I hurt my knee in Green Bay. He literally scoped me that Monday morning, cleaned me back up, and I was on the field a week later, 6 days later. So he was pretty amazing doc.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, dude, thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much. I was going to ask if people are interested on this and have ACL injuries or want to get more information, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah. Take a look at our website, Restore PDX. RESTORE PDX as in the airport.com. They can take a look at all the stuff that we're doing on the regenerative front. And then we talked about the photobiomodulation, RedVive, REDVIVE health.org, and can take a look. There's some cool videos and some lectures that I've done on there, to going into the science and some of the applications. And we'll definitely get some imaging to you, some of the before and afters, and would love for you to take a look at that. I think it's pretty compelling and cool to see.
Yeah, no, we'd love to cut that in. The fact that, now I've had ACL surgery and, multiple knee surgeries that, man, if this was 20 years ago, could have probably maybe prevented some of these things. So hopefully anybody listening to this podcast is dealing with some of these injuries. Now we got a great solution. So we'll definitely push this out. And Doc, I really appreciate you coming on. This has been amazing information.
Yeah. Thank you for having me and spending so much time. Appreciate it. It was really nice meeting you.
Yeah. Pleasure to meet you too. Thank you.
Hey there, Power Athlete Nation. Big shout out to all the heavy hitters who stuck around till the final whistle. If you've been soaking in the knowledge bombs and epic tales we've been dropping for free, here's your chance to be a game changer. Swing by klfi.com/powerathlete and toss a few bucks our way to keep the podcast fueled and firing on all cylinders. That's ko-fi.com/powerathlete. Your support makes a difference. See ya.